Welcome into the Stack Shack Sports Show. Yeah, let's talk about it. Lakers OKC just wrapped up. Thought we'd go live for a little late night stream here and talk about what happened. What I have to say, maybe one of the most frustrating games I've ever watched. Like, legitimately. Um, Especially for how close it was. Like, you get sometimes bored with a blowout or a team that's just taking it and dominating and is just going to clearly win. And so there's no, intrigue or interest in a blowout game. But this one was honestly close up until the very end. But honestly, from the beginning, even from the first half, there were serious issues with how this game was officiated. And I think the perfect example is coming down the stretch. It's, end of the fourth quarter. We're talking, maybe 8 minutes off. I guess more middle of the fourth quarter, right? We're talking about maybe 9 minutes to maybe 4 minutes. This is a fairly close game. But oh my goodness, what is up with the refereeing? And I don't know, maybe there's some OKC fans in the chat. They're gonna come at me thinking I'm just going against Oklahoma City. But to be honest, the refereeing was just poor all around. And I think even OKC fans could be in agreement with that the calls made just did not make a lot of sense. And the officiating down the stretch was clunky. It was uneven and kind of on both sides. It was disappointing. There was no game flow, I think is the word I used on X. There just was no flow. It was every single possession. There was a foul call or a review of a flagrant potential or a take foul most possessions had multiple calls of, a call on the floor or not a call on the floor. It's a continuation. Like, it was very poorly officiated down the stretch. So I don't know what needs to happen here if you're the NBA. This is a game, between OKC, the reigning defending champions, and a LeBron James-led Lakers team. Do I think the Lakers are going to beat OKC? No. Do I think they would beat them? The refs are giving this game to OKC? No. Let's stop with the nonsense of, they're all rigged to let OKC win. But there does seem to be a problem with the officiating, particularly in these games. Now, this is always a little bit of a case. Whoever's winning, it's the refs, right? Fans don't want to admit that a team's better than them. But even when you go back to eras of LeBron's height, and he would get some hate for seemingly getting a lot of calls, but never it seemed this bad of just an overall view of refereeing in the NBA, and particularly with this team. Starts with the Chet flop early. SGA actually gets into some foul trouble, which was interesting, but then seemed very frustrated. There's technical fouls going all over the place. The overall perception of the NBA is that it's poorly officiated, and that's a problem. You can say, it's just crazy fans, or it's just people wanting to hate on the Oklahoma City Thunder, or people don't like SGA. And, what about Luka? He also shoots a lot of free throws. And what about Embiid? And you have the Jaylen Brown situation, which we'll get to later. But the point I want to make is it is not just fans of OKC versus the world. It is all NBA fans seem to have this perception that the refereeing is very poor, that the certain people are getting calls that they shouldn't. There seems to be the free throw merchant the ethical basketball, ethical scoring conversations. And this applies to more than just SGA. Now, SGA, the Oklahoma City Thunder, when you're leading the league in these free throws, I mean, I saw a statistic. I let me see if I can pull it up here potentially. There are statistics out there with SGA and the number of foul calls in the last 2 years. And I think he's shot something like 400 more free throws than anybody else, than second place. When you have that kind of disparity between free throw attempts of one player versus all the others, of course, he's going to be the face of this free throw merchant in this situation. Now, obviously, he drives, and we could talk about that, but per possession, per free or per field goal attempt, SGA is way over and above everybody else. But he's not the only one who has these higher rates and has these issues. And that's where you get to, oops, excuse me, wrong screen there. That's where you get a lot of really frustrated and annoyed fans, frankly. But let's talk about the game a little bit, and then I'll wrap up with kind of some thoughts on what I think maybe the NBA needs to consider moving forward for how to just improve this perception, because it was a hard to watch game there for what should have been prime time, 8 minutes to 4 minutes in the fourth quarter. That should have been the action back and forth. This is why people like NBA. It was so clunky and so stop-start. I mean, I was feeling checked out. They just lost control. I mean, there was the weird double foul, and then moving people around on the jump ball. And I mean, honestly, you could see it from early on. I mean, JJ gets an early tech. LeBron was so incredibly frustrated. Like, I made a joke. I think he's going to retire. Like, he's just done after this game. Like, this was just terrible. But let's look at the game. We'll start with the Lakers here. Give Austin Reeves some credit here, coming off of a very poor performance. Scored 31, shot over 50%, well over 50% from the field, was 50% from three, got to the line, made most of his free throws. Unfortunately, he was minus 20. Some of that is coming here at the very end. That's not great. That's not great. But the plus minus, they did lose by almost 20. So obviously starters are going to probably look that way. Rui was fine. LeBron, pretty good, and not his best night, but still 50% from three, or from field goal range. Did have 3 turnovers, but that's not too bad. Reeves' 5 turnovers is tough. If you look at the overall stats, we go down here to the points off of turnovers. I mean, 26-14, that's tough. That's a bit difficult. No blocks. This, once again, we have a situation where the Lakers are just not a good defensive team. Again, I'm not saying that they're better than Oklahoma City or that the refs are giving Oklahoma City these games. Not at all. Oklahoma City was the better team tonight. They were the better team last time they played. If you look at the Lakers roster, they are just not good enough on defense. What is the idea here with Jake LaRavia? I mean, we're talking 10 minutes, 0 points, 0 for 2 on field goals. And he was in these 10 minutes seemingly came a lot kind of in that fourth quarter. I'm not sure. JJ Redick, I think, is actually a pretty good, solid scheme coach, and I think he's done a lot of things to keep them in this. I mean, the fact that it was such a close game, really, up until the very end, pretty impressive from the Lakers and from JJ. So I don't want to crucify him for it, but 10 minutes, no points, 0 for 2, 0 for 1. He had 1 assist, 1 steal, and a turnover. Couple of fouls. Is a minus 14. Minus 14 in 10 minutes is rough. That is a big plus minus number in very few minutes played. He did not look good. I mean, he just, the times he was in, especially on defense, and that was disappointing. I don't know, who you got. Connect's not really the same player. Throw Bronny in there. I don't know. They hurt, obviously. Luke is not there, so they're missing a lot of scoring. But they're just not a good enough defensive team, and they're running into the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are very good on defense. I mean, Dort is a beast. He may be 1 for 6 and just hoisting up a few threes. Not great, but plus minus of 1, -1. He's a defensive force. Everybody on this team plays good defense. Now we might say, hey, what's going on here with the foul calls? It seems like Oklahoma City Thunder get away with a lot more contact than anybody they play can, and that's a bit unfortunate, but Austin Reaves is just a defensive liability. You could see it coming down the stretch. He just, I don't know, it doesn't look fluid. He doesn't look like he moves well on defense, which he's very athletic. I don't really understand why he's such a bad defender, but it's just difficult to play at a high level against a good team when you just do not have decent defenders, and you're obviously missing your best scorer. So, I kind of feel bad for the Lakers. I think this could have been an interesting series with Luka, just because he brings so much scoring to the table. But, SGA bounces back, barely over the 20 points, but he did. Much better shooting, right? Good field goal percentage there. It was just unfortunate the way this game ended from the refereeing. Again, you look at this box score, and it feels like it was probably a pretty fun game. There were some good moments. It looks like fairly decent basketball. The 20 turnovers to 12 turnovers, that's going to be tough. When you turn the ball over 20 times to your opponent's 12, again, this isn't a great defensive team, so they're not forcing a bunch of turnovers. They got no blocks, 7 steals. OKC's got 12 steals. That's pretty significant, right? And those steals turn into fast break points. So you get beat by 10 on fast break points, and you get beat, by 12 on overall points off turnovers. That's tough. That's tough to deal with. So yeah, there's my thoughts just in general. I had to go live and talk about the clunkiness of this game. So how do they fix it, I think, is the real question. And the issue, I think, is maybe less a technical and more of a perception issue. So let me explain it this way. So the NBA versus something like the NFL, the NBA has always, I feel like, kind of been the cooler sport. The stars are more empowered in the NBA. NFL can feel a bit corporate, a little bit business, a machine. People follow players in the NBA more than they follow the teams. In some cases, at least more people do that in the NBA than they do in the NFL, right? In the NFL, you might have a player that you like, but you're beholden to the Philadelphia Eagles, and you don't really care. If a great player moves on, looks like A.J. Brown might move on. If he moves on, that's, you're not all of a sudden going to become a fan of that team, most likely. Maybe you were a Brady fan, but I think most Brady fans were really just Patriots fans, right? And they loved having him on there. But I don't think they were necessarily rooting all the way for Tampa Bay. They would have much rather had their Patriots there. So there is this star-driven, a little bit cooler. I would also argue a little bit more social media heavy. I mean, even Adam Silver's talked about it in that, when ratings get brought up and the ratings aren't as good. And he's like, well, look at our socials numbers, though. People are watching our highlights. People are interacting at a much higher rate, on social media. The problem that they have is that everyone right now on social media is complaining, outside of maybe Oklahoma City, but I feel like even they, like I said earlier, would probably have an issue with how the end of this game went. Multiple complaints on certain fouls. They probably thought that should have been a flagrant on Austin, on the kind of tumble down there at the basket. I don't think OKC fans were thrilled with the officiating tonight. But everybody feels the officiating is bad. And the unfortunate part about the NBA is there is another underlying factor, and that is the NBA is realistically the only sport where common fouls, simple fouls, directly result in points for a team. Right? We can talk about, issues with, a bad pass interference call at the end of a game in the NFL. And, sometimes that really does feel like they gave that team, free first down on a really big drive, and we get really frustrated about it, and they put them next to the end zone, or maybe the call was in the end zone, so they get it on the 1 yard line. But technically, a holding call or a pass interference, some of these subjective calls, roughing the passer, don't directly, immediately award points to a specific team. There is some level of, well, all right, that was a bad call, but we can overcome it and still keep them out of the end zone or whatever. In the NBA, once you get in the bonus, every single foul, every single violation turns into a points opportunity, a direct free throw points. They're free throws, and they're shooting 80%, 85%. Like, these teams are good at shooting free throws. It's almost guaranteed that you're awarding them, well, at least 1 point. Most of the time, you're awarding them 2. If you do the math on this, we were talking about analytics earlier last week, they're making more than 1 point per free throw trip, right? Trip to the line. Because they're making it, 80% of them, and they're getting 2 shots a lot of the time. So that's difficult. When you have this combination of subjective calls that directly award points, you have a huge problem on your hand if there becomes an overall perception, like there is right now, that your officiating is poor. You can't have that. And you may point out, soccer, European football. They give free kicks and stuff, which is pretty often a point, although I would argue that it's not 80%, but you would say, hey, points are more impactful. There's not as many of them. Obviously in soccer, one goal is that's probably, there's a lot of games that end 1-0, right? So much more impactful, but that's not every small violation, right? It's not, small violation, let's all go over to this side of the field, you get a free kick. No. Most violations are not going to award a free kick. The only ones that do are, in specific areas of the field or, very specific situations or specific penalties that arguably are not necessarily, super subjective. I mean, there's some level of subjectivity, but with reviews and different things, I don't feel like the awarding of free kicks is always super controversial or necessarily super ticky-tack. In an NBA game, I mean, we can argue foul calls till the cows come home. Like every possession, and especially in a game like this one, where at the end of the game, it felt like every single possession there was a different foul call. And when you're missing really blatant calls, I think of the LeBron James gets bumped after the gather step, makes the basket, but they award it on the floor. Nobody understands why that's happening. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. And that's a bad perception for the NBA. And they have to fix this. So how do they do that? We've established it's an issue. How do we do that? How do we fix this? Well, I have a couple of ideas. I think the first idea is we have fouls and, violations and things that are supposed to be in place for flopping. In fact, I think technically it's a technical foul to flop. That can be difficult, obviously, to call in the game because, a lot of the times, let's take the Chet situation, or even there was the SGA foul kind of early in the game, where a guy didn't touch him at all, but he got the foul call. That's is that a flop? Was that a flop? I don't know, not necessarily. The Chet one, I feel like, was more of a flop, and we all have seen the clips of people flopping, foul baiting, etc. There was also supposedly a rule about, they wanted to cut down on the offensive player initiating the contact, and maybe sometimes award the foul against the offensive player for, the running into, the kind of raking the arms up through to kind of get a foul call, right? The offensive player is the one who's initiating the contact. That's why, let's put a foul on them. First of all, neither of those seem to ever be called. So I think that would be nice. Let's take a look at officiating. And let's talk about offensive players initiating contact. And maybe we need to have a discussion with players, with coaches, and with the refs around the league of, obviously, when you're driving to the basket, there's a higher chance of contact. But there's some pretty clear, obvious things that we can see where, the lean in, kind of push off. We got to start calling this both ways. The push off, oh, I got bumped. Jeez Louise. I mean, come on, people. We got to call it both ways. That's got to be on the offensive guy some of the time. So that's the first idea. But the second idea is actually, I think, the NBA should potentially look into some level of fine or way of reprimanding flopping. It's hard in a game to reprimand flopping because, well, most of the time it works, right? And you're like, is that really a flop? It looks like there was contact. You're watching it live. Somebody's head goes back. You're like, oh, he must have gotten hit in the face. Turns out he didn't. He just threw his head back when the guy came near him so that he would get a foul call. That feels really bad. And in game, I think it's going to be very difficult to officiate that and to recognize that. But we can all see it after the game. We can all look watch the highlights, watch the replays, and we can go, huh, nobody touched him. Why did he flail around like that when there was no contact whatsoever? In those situations, I think a fine might be involved. Like, it doesn't need to be a big fine, but we got to have some level of calling out certain players who seem to flail a lot. And, maybe a few $1,000s wouldn't be a terrible idea. I really don't know what else to do. But I think if you did those two things, that would help. Realistically, I think the biggest issue is the NBA right now doesn't look like they're doing anything about it. And I think that's the biggest frustration. It feels like the NBA and the refs are okay with this. They're not doing anything about it. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous at this point, and I think that's what you have to do if you're the NBA. You have to get a hold on it, and you have to look like you're trying. You're trying to do something, right? Something to curb it, something to discourage the behavior, something to fix and help the refereeing. I really don't understand, in other areas, you think of a player like Draymond or back in, earlier, like a Ben Wallace and whatnot. Certain players, maybe some bad boy Pistons eras. You can think of these different players in the past that have not gotten the benefit of the doubt in certain plays and are, the refs are quick to tee him up, right? Give him a technical foul because this guy, he's got a history of being a little dirty or a little over the top and definitely pushing the envelope. So you want to set the tone early and you tee him up early to say, hey, no, we're not dealing with this, right? Certain guys really yelling at the refs a lot. You might just, all right, we're going to set the tone early. And those players don't get the benefit of the doubt in certain situations. What I find so interesting is, especially with a player like SGA or a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder, how is their reputation not affecting at all? Like, again, I don't think it should. Like, if there's a foul, you got to call the foul. But you would think that the refs would, I don't know, take a moment to say, hey, these guys flop a lot. Boy who cried wolf. This is just a human reaction. This guy flops a lot. Maybe that should subconsciously, I don't know, make some sort of effect where you go, I'm going to look at these, fouls a little differently. I'm gonna really make sure I saw some actual contact there before I just give them the benefit of the doubt of the whistle. For some reason, it feels like OKC always gets the benefit of the doubt on the whistle. It really does. I don't know how. It's bizarre. I mean, this isn't egregious for SGA to go to the line and shoot 9 free throws, but he shot the ball 13 times. He had 13 field goal attempts and 9 free throw attempts. That's a lot. Now, he does drive and all of that, but they just shoot a lot of free throws, man. And it's surprising to me that no particular refs, I feel like it would just be a human emotion. They see all the flopping online. They see that, people are frustrated about it. Obviously, the NBA is aware of the way their perception is going. I'm surprised there isn't any level of, maybe we should give them less of the benefit of the doubt. I don't know. It really doesn't make any sense to me that they're in this situation, but that's what they're in. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on Lakers Thunder, and really both games. You'll see if we go on X right now, it's just full of JJ Redick in post-game conference. He's calling out the refs. There was a very heated discussion, if we watch this clip here from Bleacher Report. I mean, Austin was in the ref's face. They like all sat around and were like, all right, game's over. We need to talk. Come here, refs. We need to have a chat. Like, this was ridiculous. And it really was. It was not fun to watch down the stretch. It really wasn't. The game was clunky. There was no pace. There was no flow. So yeah, just honestly an embarrassing performance from the NBA refereeing. Let's talk about some of the other games. The other game today was Pistons-Cavs. In this series, we got Detroit up 2-0. I joked that the previous round with the Cavs winning the Game 7, that was one of the more, I guess, less hyped I've ever been for a Game 7 in any of the NBA. I mean, who doesn't love a Game 7? And I just wasn't really excited about it. I just don't. The Cavs are just not that good. The East is just not that good in general. Pistons, I mean, give credit. Tobias Harris and Cade Cunningham are doing their thing. And, you know, they're getting some help every once in a while, which is good. And they're winning. The Cavs, James Harden, it is disappointing, I think. James is a great basketball player, has been for a long time, but I don't know what it is. He just doesn't have it in the playoffs. He has now had, I think, 25% of all his playoff games. And he's been in a lot of playoff games. He's been on good teams. He's been a good player. They've made the playoffs a lot. His teams have. I think it's 25% of the time he has the same number of turnovers, or maybe even more number of turnovers, the same or more, as field goals made. He made 3 field goals in 37 minutes, and he had 4 turnovers. That is all-time abysmal. I honestly, I just kind of feel bad for him. Evan Mobley having 1 rebound is rough. I mean, Max Strus had 3. Schroeder in 20 minutes had 3 rebounds. And our starting forward, Mobley, who's not a small dude, you know, not the best shooting performance either, but 1 rebound? Like, get some rebounds, kid. Like, you got to go get some rebounds. That's pretty unfortunate, but I honestly just feel bad for, I honestly kind of feel bad at this point for James Harden. I definitely made a lot of fun of him about it, but my goodness, in the past, you know, this is just sad. It's just sad how bad he is in the playoffs. I mean, he just has these games all the time, it feels like. So, Pistons, I think, are going to lock this one up pretty quick. They play great defense, obviously causing problems for Harden. Yeah, there you go. Let's talk about the T-Wolves Spurs series, because we haven't had a chance to do that. This was yesterday. We'll go through these fairly quick here. But Spurs come back with a vengeance after dropping game 1 at home. Now, that was significant, right? Ant Edwards comes back, and the Spurs rolled. They rolled in this one. Yeah, almost 40 points. That's pretty significant. You know, you look at the overall stats. Shooting 40%, it's not even that bad. 30% from 3 is not great, but this game, let's first say the Spurs needed this one. The Spurs needed a win here. They going down 2-0 at home would not have gone well. So you definitely had a frustrated Spurs team. Victor Wembanyama remains probably the most impactful player on the court that I've ever seen it. And that's not to say necessarily he's, the greatest of all time already or something like that, but you have to completely change how your team plays when he's on the court. And that's a unique, ability for him. I think the T-Wolves came in, they kind of stole game one sneakily, ruined, Wemby's big block game, although there were a few of those were goaltends. That was fair. It was a fair criticism. But I think they kind of stole game one, and I almost feel like they kind of phoned it in a little bit. I mean, Anthony Edwards was not great. He looked like he was pressing. Obviously still coming off the injury, so he's in limited minutes. But he's, still a great player. And you just didn't get the production out of, McDaniels and Randall. Although it's not that they, were terrible. McDaniels, 60% shooting. That's pretty darn good, actually. But only played 20 minutes. Like, this game was over early. And I think there was a level of, okay, we stole one game on the road. Now we have home court advantage, right? Essentially in the series. And as soon as the Spurs came out, obviously very energized, very disappointed in themselves, T-Wolves kind of, all right, we lost this one. That's honestly how it felt to me. It's a 7-point lead in the first quarter. The second quarter, we're kind of over at this point. You come out after half, maybe try and do something. They don't end up being successful. All right, sounds good. We'll pack it up. We'll see you in Minnesota. That's honestly how I feel. This, as a contrast, one more thing before I move on. This right here, game one was a perfect example in my mind of really great basketball to watch. I really enjoyed game one. Game one was fun. It was flowy. It was great offense and defense. And two great teams going at it. It looks honestly like a different brand of basketball than the Cavs Pistons. Part of that, maybe give credit to the Pistons defense, but I think if we were to look, this is probably the worst game. Let's go to game one here. We'll pull it up. The stats over here on game one. 21 and 18 free throws. You compare that to the Laker game we just watched. 26 and 21. That's a lot more free throws. It's not completely out of the realm of possibilities for free throws, but that's few more free throws. And the game flowed so nicely in game one here. It was just a lot of fun to watch. I just have to say, this was a perfect example of the NBA at its best. This is fast. This is high energy. This is great play, offense and defense. Seeing things you've never seen before. Wembanyama blocking 12 shots. It was fun. It was a lot of fun to watch. So it's tough because that is here in the NBA, and OKC games are they're tough to watch, is how I'd kind of end that kind of thought there. Let's talk about the Knicks Sixers. We had game 2 yesterday, and Knicks win again. Sixers looked much better than game 1. I think they came out kind of flat coming off of the big win, the big upset, right, over the Celtics. They came in, New York's ready to roll, and New York seems to have found something. Brunson's getting his. Karl Anthony Towns is kind of running this point center thing. The Knicks have figured something out after a very shaky, right, real shaky start to the series. They have absolutely blown people out here. And then even this game was close, much closer. But in the end, talk about a defensive fourth quarter. 19 and 12 points scored. Kind of a wild contrast to the first three, but shout out the Knicks, man. They look pretty good. 76ers, no Joel in this one. I guess rest him and see if he can come back now that they're going to be in Philadelphia. Obviously, he wasn't a big factor in game one, where the Knicks absolutely boat raced him. But, I think the Sixers, if they're healthy, Joel is a very good player. And if you get the Joel that they got in game 7 before this series, he's really a legitimately talented individual. But the Knicks, we talked last week, it's what is your kind of 3 deep? What are your big 3? And then do you have depth past that? And the Knicks do. I don't think the Cavs necessarily do. I mean, we just talked about Evan Mobley. 1 rebound and 3 points. That's not going to cut it here as a third player. And, Harden not having a good game. It's how do your big 3, and then do you get some depth as well? So OG Anunoby has just been on fire in this resurgence. And Karl Anthony Towns, 7 assists, 10 boards, playing this kind of point center, super efficient, 6-8 shooting, 7 for 9 from the line. He's getting his. That is fantastic. And realistically, I think most people would say it's Brunson, Bridges, Towns, maybe is your big 3. But when you add in OG Anunoby and then you add in a great defensive player in Josh Hart, you're in a good spot. And then you add, some bench. Miles McBride comes in. He's not bad off the bench, especially as a defensive player. Clarkson comes in. Gets 6 points, 8 minutes. That's pretty good. You get a little bit of help, but, we look, okay, big 3. Oh, there's a 4th, right? And that's where we talk about. That's what these best teams have. You look at the box scores in these other matchups. This one's probably a bad example, but let's look at Lakers Thunder. What are the Thunder? Well, they got kind of a big 3 tonight, included McCain as depth, though, right? You got Shea, Mitchell, Chet. There's your big 3, all over 20. And then you got some great depth, right? Hartstein's going to give you 10 on 5 of 6, super efficient shooting, give you 9 boards. You got Wallace and McCain coming off the bench. McCain was great tonight, especially with the fact that Shea got some early foul trouble. But you see this. Do you have a big 3 and then do you have a 4th? Do you got another guy? And then Dort, similar to how I was saying, Hart's a great defensive player. It's not going to score a lot, but there's your Lou Dort, right? This seems to be the pattern and the formula to winning in the NBA right now. Let's talk about the Lakers. Do they have a big 3? Well, unfortunately, they're missing Luka, so they don't. That means you've got Rui's your 3rd. You got LeBron, Austin, Rui. Smart gave you 14. Ayton only gave you 3. But realistically, you only got 2 people over 20. These other teams are having 3, sometimes almost 4. And then off the bench, you're needing a big night from Kennard, and he was okay. Honestly, 4 for 5, 2 for 3 from 3-point, 10 points, not too bad, but you need a little more depth, right? And that's the problem with the Lakers right now, especially, obviously, without Luka. You put Luka in there, now you might have a big 3 plus some depth. Marcus Smart has a good game, or Ayton has a big game. It's some potential. All right, we look back at, Timberwolves and Spurs. 2 teams that we think are actually pretty solid. What's the big 3? Well, you got Jaden McDaniels, you got Anthony Edwards, you got Julius Randle, And then you also have Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert, right? So you got your big three, and then you got some depth and some really solid defensive players. That's the other thing the Lakers don't have. No defensive player necessarily. I mean, Marcus Smart, I guess. But not the depth, and it's not that, Jaden McDaniels and Connolly and Anthony Edwards can guard people. Like, they're not bad defenders like Austin Reeves is a bad defender. So, a little different. You go to the Spurs. Castle, Wembanyama, Fox. But, I mean, Harper goes off for 18. I mean, look at this box score. That is depth. Depth wins in this league right now. So, if I was to give some predictions, this one, I think it really comes down to how Ant plays and how healthy is he. But this one feels a little bit of a toss-up to me. We'll see. I think we'll find out next game a lot about this series. Game 1, T-Wolves come in and they steal a close one. Is game 3 like that game, where it's a close matchup, down to the wire, down to the end, a battle? If that's the case, then I think the Timberwolves have a shot in the series. But then game 2, Timberwolves kind of got punched in the face early. Wemby came out looking to score. They got up to a really big lead. Game was kind of over pretty early. If that happens next game, then they've got no chance, right? And so we'll see. I think we're going to learn a lot next game. Knicks, Sixers, I just don't trust the Sixers enough at this point. I mean, Joel Embiid's health is always a concern. I actually feel pretty confident the Knicks are going to win this series. Even though this was a close game and the Sixers have, they're a feisty team and they're not a terrible team. Pistons are going to lock this one up with the Cavs. I don't even think anybody's really going to disagree with me on that one. I just don't see the Cavs really putting up much of a fight in the series. They might get a game, but going to be difficult. And then Thunder are going to beat the Lakers. It's just going to happen. Luka's not coming back. They're gonna beat the Lakers. So that's my thoughts there on the NBA. I'd really love to know, those of you that have been watching the stream, those of you that are watching this maybe later. I really want to know, what are your thoughts on the refereeing in the NBA? I think there's some real concerns out there. I think the NBA has a major perception problem. People don't think the games are officiated well. They think certain teams are getting a whistle on one side of the ball, right? OKC's SGA seems to be, if you're in his general vicinity and he kind of flails around a little bit, he gets a call. And then when you watch OKC play defense, it is physical. I mean, they are wailing on him. It's pretty ridiculous. And they're a good team. I'm not saying, like, the refs are not, in my opinion, changing the outcome. I think OKC can win these games without it, but it just makes for a poor watching experience. It's just very unfortunate if you are, an NBA fan. It's hard to watch. The end of that game, it was a close game where at like 8 minutes to go in the fourth, the next 4 minutes turned into just foul calls every possession, calls that made no sense, calls that should have been called, double fouls, and arguments over where to stand on a jump ball, and no continuation, and teeing people up. It was clunky. There was no game flow. I felt like we were watching the refs do a review literally every possession there. It felt like there were 3 or 4 possessions in a row where we had some sort of review each and every possession. So that was tough. That's tough as an NBA fan. So I think, they got to do something. I proposed a couple of ideas. I'd love to know what yours are in the comments. Thank you for hanging out. These late night streams are kind of fun. I want to maybe spice it up here a little bit as we get going and we get more used to the flow of this. But there's the instant reaction. I thank you all for hanging out, and yeah, we'll